Hey folks. How is everyone doing? Everyone hear me okay? So as promised, public. Okay, I'm going to assume that we're on, that we're running. And hope that people chat. There we go. Okay. So today, whole goal is just some chill Diablo gameplay and to answer questions that you guys might have, Q&A about the development of the game. I want to keep it civil. There's obviously going to be some questions that I won't answer. I'll just chat about things that I think about, like as I play, just memories, that sort of thing. And as we go, and if people have questions, they can pop it up there. I have some other questions from the community that people have already asked. So I'll try and answer those as well as we go. So, but for now, let's play some Diablo. It's been a hot minute since I played Diablo, but I'm just going to play adventure mode because holy crap, I've played through the story more than enough times. And I simply don't need to play through that again. Let's just go and go here. I'll say Punish was probably like one of the abilities I didn't love the most about the Crusader. Like he needed just a basic attack, but it always felt like, I don't know. It never felt like it was the strongest attack that we could have done. I typically always like jump straight to slash, or smite as fast as it comes up. When we were actually making the Crusader the first time, we had this thing called a strike team at Blizzard, which was a group of people who played the game, and then they would give feedback on it. And early on, we had a lot of questions and kind of, I guess, confusion around questions and confusion around the role of the Crusader, because he was always meant to be this hybrid melee and ranged character. So we felt that intentionally putting some of these skills early on that were very melee would reinforce some of that. Like Shield Bash, you can sort of see like all of his very melee, like basic attacks are early on in the skill kit, as opposed to I think we actually had Blessed Shield fairly early at one point. We're also going to find out just how well I can play and talk at the same time. Fortunately, Diablo is a very chill kind of... You don't have to worry about the... It's not too complicated anymore, as opposed to when it first came out. I don't know. It doesn't really matter at this level. Oh, Bling, you asked this the other day. So a couple that we tried out. Probably the one that I remember the most is one where... So for example, if we take a look at the skill tree, I'll eventually have access to all of my skills runes, and they're just part of the kit. They're not something that I need to unlock as we go. Sorry, they're just things that I unlock as I play. They're not something which, like they're just embedded. So one of the ways that we tried it for, I think it was about the 3rd or 4th iteration, was that you had to actually find the runes as you were playing. So, for example, as you were killing monsters in the same way that you would find a Crusader shield or a flail, you would find the runes for the abilities that you had on your character. You might also find runes that were for other classes as well. Not only that, but you also would... each rune had different... I guess you could call it rarity. We didn't have them as rarity. We had them as like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, tier 5. I think there was 3 different tiers to each rune. And then on top of that, so you had to, not only did you have to find the rune that was for the skill that you wanted, that you liked. So for example, like I mentioned, I don't love punish. But, you know, say I wanted to find a rune to upgrade punish or slash. I'd have to find that rune from a creature somewhere in the same way that I would have to find a shield. And then I would equip that. And then I would also have to find a higher rarity version of that rune as well, in order to make it better. The core stats of that were basically just more damage, if I remember correctly. On top of that, there was affixes on runes. I don't know if that was in the first iteration of this, or if this was something that was added later, but there were actual affixes on the runes as well. So for example, I'm going to assume that you guys know what I mean by affixes, but affixes are, you know, toughness, recovery, more specifically here, like +3 life after each kill. Like that's an affix or a suffix, a prefix or a suffix. That meant that the overall skill game had just way more depth to it. You would actually run around and try and find new skills, new skill runes. And then there was, the ability for you to really try and min-max the skills of your character beyond just the equipment that you were wearing, the paper doll that you were wearing. I actually argued hard against the idea of it. And I wish I hadn't. In retrospect, I think it was a mistake not to do something along those lines. I'm not going to say that the skill system that we ended up with is bad. I think it's perfectly fine for Diablo. But as many of people have pointed out, there is an amount of simplicity to the game, which doesn't really lend itself to the ARPG, the desire of the action role-playing game audience. It was finicky. I felt it was too hardcore. I felt that there was a part of it where you could actually... Okay, so I also want to say up front, it's been a long time since all this stuff happened, and my memory is not the greatest anymore. So I might be remembering some of these things a little bit incorrectly in the sense of the order of it and everything like that. But there was an amount of being able to target some of the runes that you could farm them in the same way that the Infernal Machine is farmable. So you would be able to farm some runes. I didn't like the idea of players just going and looking up on a wiki the best way to find or farm a certain thing, and then, you know, a certain skill rune, and then coming back and then just repeating it and repeating it and repeating it in order to get the thematically best affixes, like suffixes and prefixes for what they needed for their build. That being said, I think that's just part of an ARPG. Like having that amount of complexity to it, I think, and being able to like focus and customize your build in that way. I mean, look at Path of Exile 2. The amount of complexity that is in there that you can focus on and tailor your build is insane, and that's actually what the audience wants. What are we doing here?
I require more wrath.
Can we just take a pause and look at Shield Bash for a second? Look how pretty that is. Now, not just pretty, not just from a visual perspective, but also from the pacing of it all. See how he pauses before he does the big impact? And it cascades out. What the hell did I just do? I don't know why I zoomed in there. Like I said, it's been a while since I played, but I'm going to back out and come back in because I can't play Diablo zoomed in like that. Okay. Yeah, I know. It looked good, but man, I can't play like that. That's too close for me. getting back to it, so much effort was put into just the feeling of him leaning into that attack. So much iteration went into the skills here.
Hear my husband moaning inside.
What do you think of the trend of crafting becoming a focus of ARPGs? I always felt like it replaced the dynamism of random chance with the monotony of targeted grinding.
Struggle so my love. This hero has come to set me free.
I think that crafting is the effective backup. In a game where everything is incredibly random, and that's fundamental to the game, crafting allows some sense of agency. It also provides regular cadence of rewards for players. So whenever someone sits down and plays a game, they want to be rewarded for it. Their time investment, they want their time investment to actually have meaning. If they don't, if they walk away without feeling like they got something sort of tangible for it, I think that leaves them with, I guess, kind of a bad taste in their mouth with regards to the game. And this isn't just an ARPG thing. This is a bunch of different things. If you sit down and you play a game of Mario Party with your family, and then it was a terrible experience, you know, if you all argued the entire time, you're going to walk away and that's not actually rewarding to you. In an ARPG, the core reward is going to be loot. That's what you're looking for, is you're looking for some amount of progression over time. So what crafting tends to do is it tends to supplement that and provide you with a backup reward along the cadence there. Something where it feels like no matter how much time you invested into the game, you are getting something tangible out of it that you felt like was what you wanted, as opposed to just the random element of it all. I have no idea what I'm doing here, by the way.
Not enough rat.
Yes, it shouldn't replace... Crafting shouldn't replace looting. And in an ARPG where nothing is really targeted, very little in an action role-playing game has a targeted element to it. I mean, Kadala was a good example of crafting for the expansion for us. That's why very little effort actually went into actually doing any real work on the blacksmith or the mystic or anything, because at the end of the day, that's what Kadala was for. She was functionally, okay, I have played the game for a certain number of hours or certain number of minutes or one session. And then when I finish, I come out of it and I didn't get an item that I was hoping to get. Right? So at that moment, then I feel like I want something. And if I don't get anything out of it, it's going to feel really, really terrible. So crafting then gives me a chance to make up for that. I also made the crafting for the original Diablo and I hated it. We just didn't have enough time to do anything better. It was too late in the process, which is ironic coming from the era of Blizzard, which was when it's done. But when it's done was much more around the notion of the holistic game as opposed to minor systems. If we continue to focus on when it's done, we would never, ever, ever have shipped Diablo. There always would have been one more thing to work on. Playing and talking about game design and not sounding like a moron, or trying not to sound like a complete moron, is actually really hard. I don't know how people do this. Okay. Give me one. Hey, Vincent. Oh. Okay, so there is a question from... I made a post on LinkedIn as well about this. And so Jing had a question... how do you guys know what new gameplay mechanics would be fun? If not, how did you guys work to find that new mechanic? So fortunately we had Diablo 2 as sort of a baseline for that. I think Diablo 3 fundamentally some of the systems that were fun. It was more about looking at Diablo 2 and asking ourselves, what do we want to improve? What do we want to take forward? What do we want to fix? I mean, the skill system, for example, is probably the best example of something which, the skill system in Diablo 2 had been replicated into World of Warcraft. It served an interesting function in Diablo 2. It was probably one of the first real skill systems that allowed you to customize your build. Okay, I'm going to take that back. I think D&D had a lot more of that, but it was a good example of a skill system which did allow you to customize your build quite well. But then it had a lot of issues with it with regards to narrowing in the audience. It became like very hardcore, and we wanted to, naturally bring the game to a broader audience. So we decided to iterate on it. And then it just came down to pure just iteration. Like how much iteration can we do? How much time can we spend building something and trying something different? We didn't know something was going to be fun. We had a suspicion that something might be fun, but you never really know, in my mind, if something is going to be fun or not until you implement it, until you build it. And then through the process of building it and building it in a very rough way, that's when you start figuring out, hey, okay, this is something which, yeah, it has legs or not. Let's swap to sweep attack. Punish. Roar. You know, one of the hardest things about making the Crusader? Naming runes. There's so many. And it was the same thing on World of Warcraft. Names for things is one of the hardest things about making this stuff. Like finding proper names for something that make it feel, I don't know, like tie it to it. I don't know if you guys have had the same problem with your designs or not. Yeah, Bling, it's not just about fallback and agency. It's also about regular rewards. Regular cadence, regular rewards, feeling like you're getting something. The Paragon system is a big part of that as well. Which, by the way, we took straight from Borderlands. We were Travis, the designer who did that, loved it and heavily inspired by Borderlands, which I think is great. That's a great way to like come up with your ideas. A lot of crafting in an ARPG as well is not just about making a new item, it's about customizing an item to fit your build. ARPGs are all about creating builds, in my mind. And the more opportunity there is to explore and discover new builds that are fun or different or interesting, the longer legs your game has. I don't know that I want that there. I don't know why I put that there. It's a great question, Vincent. When you're not in the target audience as a designer, like I'm assuming you mean as a designer who's working on the game, when you're not in the target audience, how do you avoid bias while building game mechanics? I often struggle with what I find fun versus what the audience actually enjoys. Yep. I think it's a matter of, and this is, you're not alone. I think like one of the misconceptions of designers or non-professional designers, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I mean that more in like designers who are younger or who are making mods or who are aspiring to become game designers. They have this belief that, or a misconception that they're going to be working on games that they love the entire time that they're making games. Like say, if they love playing Call of Duty, well, then they're going to get to work on Call of Duty. But then they get into the industry and all of a sudden they're making an RTS game and they hate RTS games, or they're making card battlers. Now, ideally, you get to work on a game that you do love. But the reality is you do this for a living as well, and you end up having to make natural sacrifices because it's a job. You know, like, it's a fun job. It's super exciting. It's something which can drive a lot of passion. But at the end of the day, it's a job. So you have to do things that you might not ordinarily find fun. How to accomplish that? For me, and I can only speak from my perspective, it's been about, I find it enjoying to discover it's the psychology of it for me. It's not just about building something that I would play. It's about the understanding of the player. So, for example, in an ARPG, complete, candid, authentic confession, I probably didn't play Diablo enough in order to work on Diablo. There are other people out there that played Diablo way more than I ever did and understood the game way better than I did. Before I got the job working on Diablo. And so I made some mistakes with regards to thinking the game was much more about like challenge, like that things should be harder than what they really are. And then tuning it in such a way when realistically the game is about efficiency. The game is about how fast can you kill something in order to like get the loot. So how did I, in that situation, understanding that, like growing to understand the audience, talking to the audience to really find out what drives them, and then trying to find interesting ways to solve those problems for them. So understanding their psychology, one, I find that very compelling as a designer. Like, what is it that motivates them? I think a lot of games, most games are all based around intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. Extrinsic motivation is a good example of, like, say, loot, right? Like, getting better loot is a clear extrinsic motivator. Eventually, the intrinsic motivation becomes, this is just naturally fun. So understanding the audience by talking to them, by playing the games that they play, by exposing myself to all the things that audience enjoys, and then trying to solve the problem for them. Most of the time, games, especially the ones that we make now, where the game environment is so broad and so big and there's so many games out there to play, we end up in situations where it's not necessarily about making something new. It's about taking something and improving on it for solving problems for the audience. So what is the core problem that they're having? And then how do you solve for it? Like, what would that solution be? And oftentimes that isn't what they're asking for. There's this famous quote from Henry Ford, the guy that came up with the car. He says, if I had have asked them what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse, when actually what they wanted was a car. So finding the car, finding the solution to the problem, which isn't necessarily what the audience is directly asking for, but more finding trying to experiment and come up with something interesting in the game space that will still appeal to them, but won't, be far or dramatically different or far away from what it is that they want. That's my perspective on it. Instead of like, oh yeah, now suddenly like I'm playing a game which I love to play. Souls-like is a great example for me. I don't actually enjoy Souls-like very much. I played the crap out of Elden Ring. I played Sekiro as much as I possibly can. Most of the time, though, I try and cheese it. Like, I'll try and find something which just lets me level up. But I find it very interesting to play those games so that I can understand the audience, so that I can understand what is it about this type of game that these people find so interesting. And if I was to try and solve that for them, or if I was to try and improve on some of those problems for them, what would the car look like as opposed to just a faster horse? I hope it helps. It's about finding joy in the journey, not just the result. And hey, if I haven't, Mighty, not yet. Do you want to pop the question in here again, and I can answer it?
Strength is restored.
How we approach the design of classes and their item sets. I think they're really well done to make the player progression feel fun. So curious about how the process went. To begin with, we sucked at it. We did not have items. Legendaries were the last thing that we really did. The designer who worked on it was constantly sort of yelling and screaming, not literally, but saying, hey, we need to put more effort into these things. And we didn't. We basically made all items and item sets things that were just better,
I need to go back.
just slightly better stats. This is a big reason why when we first released, we didn't really have good motivation for people to play. Everyone was just searching for 6 affix items when they should have been looking for legendaries and set items. When it came to the revision of it, I actually did the first revision. Itemization was not the best when we first released. Especially legendaries, we just didn't put enough effort towards them. Then as we were live and as we started to realize, hey, these are the things that players really should be chasing and really should be like going for, then we started to do a pass on them. I took a stab at doing the first pass, and most of the design process was around looking at abilities that the different classes had and asking the question of how would we break this? What would be an interesting way to break this? So some of it was about just giving you extra, like doubling down on runes. The whole philosophy around the legendaries, especially the first pass, was basically this should feel game breaking. This is after we'd started to realize that the game was about efficiency over challenge, that it was okay to allow players to break the game, as opposed to trying to like make it really, really hard to kill Diablo. Like that really wasn't the point of the game. The point of the game was gaining power and then gaining more abilities, not more abilities, sorry, gaining more power and gaining gear through that. But yeah, like the whole philosophy around them was, how do we allow the player to break the game? This was really unlocked once we had seasons, because then seasons could be something where it was very much, hey, you can break the game. It's just for a season. It doesn't matter if a whole bunch of people manage to get the ridiculous blessed hammer build, which just puts blessed hammers everywhere on the screen, and they're like completely wiping everything out, because then the season's going to reset. And then in the next season, we can put in a new set that deliberately breaks something different, and it is just another chase item for you to go for. But yeah, fundamentally, they were about breaking builds, breaking the game, and trying to give players something new to chase. Then there were a bunch of ones that were just cosmetic. There was like ones that were, it was a dagger that bled. Those obviously, they weren't the best, but we needed ideas, and ideas are actually really hard to come up with. How does the pressure from making money affect game decision from game developers these days? Oh, yeah. See, the best answer I can give there is the talk, the speech that Sven gave at the Game Awards. I have it as a short on my YouTube channel. At Blizzard, for the longest time, designers were not focused on what would make money. Designers were focused on what would be fun. If you make a game that is fun, you will make money. Now, fun has all these different kinds of connotations to it. It's not, there's engaging, there's, you know, fun is like an extraordinarily loaded term. People get mad at me when I say this, but at the end of the day, if no one wants to play your game, you're not going to make any money from it. It's simple. Like, if your movie is terrible, no one's going to go see it. So you're not going to make any money from it. If your book is poorly written and doesn't have an engaging story or characters, no one's going to read it. So you're not going to make any money from it. So if your game isn't fundamentally something that is fun, and that is an incredibly broad term, and I fully accept that, but if your game isn't fundamentally fun, and if you start your design around how are we going to make money from people, I think you're in trouble. Frankly, I don't think that you're going to end up making a lot of money. Now, there's probably like good examples of where I'm wrong there in the industry, of where that was done, but I think it's becoming much harder to do, because I think that the audiences in general are becoming much more savvy about what fun actually is and being exploited for money. I'm going to scroll up, make sure I'm not missing too much here. Would you say it's harder to find the right balance when the game is not a live service? Vincent, what do you mean by balance? How do you decide what feels fun in a particular genre, like with Diablo? Understand what the audience wants. Understand what it is that they're looking for, and then provide that to them. I know it sounds really simple, but it is. Fun is about what the audience is looking for. I talked a little. I talked about how to make a game that you don't find fun, and this is something that I think a lot of people assume when I say make a game that's fun. I don't mean make a game that's fun for you. I mean make a game that's fun for your audience. Do you ask players? How do you figure out what the audience is looking for, especially if you're an indie dev who doesn't have as many resources for market research? Play the living crap out of the games. And yeah, ask the player. Reddit is a great source for this. Again, you have to infer. If you're an indie dev, ideally, you're making a game that you find fun. Because you shouldn't have, ideally, you shouldn't have as much pressure from, say, a publisher to make a game for a very specific audience. I think if you're an indie dev, and I know the struggle is real for like funding and everything like that. But ideally, if you're an indie dev, a big part of the reason why people do indie is because they are tired of working on the next Assassin's Creed for Ubisoft, and they want to branch out on their own. Look at Nate Hercupile. He, was tired of working on other people's games, so he wanted to branch out and do his own. So, play the crap out of the games, learn as much as you possibly can about them, and then that will unlock the ability for you to understand what it is the audience wants and then build something around that. Finding the fun, basically. Isn't it easier to achieve that fun via trial and error? It totally is. I fully believe in prototyping, iterating. I do not think that the last time that I wrote a game design document that was like a big document was on Freedom Force, and that was 24 years ago. And the only reason we did that is because we had one engineer, because we didn't have a game engine. Back then, we didn't have Unity or Unreal or anything like that. We had one engineer. And so it was myself and one other person, and we wrote the design document. And then as soon as we started building something, everything changed. And it's the same way today. I think game design documents should be more like concept art. And then as fast as possible, you should be building something, because we don't ship those documents. We ship the game. And so start making something in a very short, simple format. Yep. The prototype that we had for Freedom Force was, we had a conference room that I don't know if you guys know what Freedom Force was, but it was a top-down superhero-inspired game that was semi-turn-based, very inspired by XCOM, very inspired by Syndicate Wars. And what we did is we built a city out of cardboard on the conference room table, and then we printed out little pictures of the characters, and then we would play the game. We would like take something, and then we'd make it like we'd pretend that we were playing. We're like, okay, so Minuteman wants to jump up onto the building. Okay, well, that's something that we need to program. That's something that we need to add to the game. So what's the math for that? Like, how do we figure out what the trajectory is for that? And allowed us to like figure out the perspective on things. Again, I don't think that you'd need to do that today, but if you were looking at prototyping a core mechanic, then yes, you totally could do that outside of a game just in a faster way. Yeah, Vincent, I think that's a big part of it. I think experience is great. That's why for newer developers, I suggest they build something as small as humanly possible that they really enjoy playing. If you enjoy playing survivors games, you know, like bullet heaven games, then make one of those. I don't think the world really needs many more bullet heaven games, but you know, it's a good way of trying to learn the genre and doing it in as small a way as possible, because there's a lot of technical hurdles with regards to that. Just making a game, just sitting down and doing it. For all the whatever people say about AI is going to be able to make games for us, you know, I don't know that that's realistic. I think there's still going to be a lot of work that needs to happen by a human in order to make something. Here's a story. So, I don't know if you guys know of a game called Impossible Creatures. It was an RTS game. It wasn't very good. We made it at Relic. It was a game about combining different creatures. So you'd collect creature DNA, and then almost like Spore style, you would make creatures out of something. So you'd have like a giraffe head with a wolf body, and then that would be a unit that you would pump out, and then that would be part of your army. Super weird concept, but we made RTS games at Relic. That's what we did. It probably should have been like a kid's game, but what it ended up, that team then went on to make, like, the Impossible Creatures wasn't great, but then that team went on to make Dawn of War. And Dawn of War was pretty damn good. I'm going to put it out there. It's one of the games that I've worked on that I'm most proud of. Like, because that team had the embedded knowledge of building an RTS game together, we moved on. And as a team, we were creatively gelling. We were working well together. We had this strong understanding of what was fun. There was a really, really strong prototype of Dawn of War. So we knew what to build and what to do.
I will enjoy this. Not ready yet.
Yeah, I've got a video on AI. I think the future, it's just going to be another tool. It's not going to be something that replaces everyone. It's just going to be a tool that people use. And the stuff that I've seen that's out there right now is not terribly good. There are some like that are genuinely like interesting, but the ones that I've seen are much more like, okay, it's like, it's helping me, it's not doing it for me type thing. Exactly.
Patience.
Can I just say this feeling of combat is exactly why I think Diablo 3 is still so much fun today. Just the core combat is just so much fun. I'm probably, if there's enough interest, going to try and get my friend Julian Love, who was the lead technical artist, which is a bit of a misnomer, but he was the lead technical artist for Diablo 3 and he worked on Diablo 2. I'm probably trying to try and get like a similar, like, let's play Diablo together and chat about Diablo. Because I think there's so much that he can talk about with regards to the way that characters are built that would be really useful. So it's an interesting question. Zumulus, you think that Diablo 3 party play is one of the best amongst the popular ARPGs? How important was the multiplayer side of the game when the classes were being designed? It was always top of mind. We knew that we wanted we always wanted it so philosophically when we talked about multiplayer, because there is this trade-off of solo versus multiplayer. And regardless of all the drama around, hey, you have to play online and all that sort of thing that happened, the philosophy was always, we wanted you to feel, we wanted to reward you for playing with friends, but we didn't want to punish you if you played alone. It basically then turns into the soft benefits that you get by playing with friends. There are no abilities that are exclusively beneficial to other, like there's nothing in the game which is like, okay, this is only something that buffs other people, or this is only a heal which heals other players. It always had to have something that benefited the player themselves so that it would be helpful in solo play. The laws are a really good example of this. When I hit level 14, I'll show them more. But the laws all work in such a way that when it's on my bar, I get a passive buff. I'm just better because I have it. But if I'm with my friends and I'm nearby and I'm playing together, then I can push that button and I make them all better as well. There's also the passive bonuses that you get. I think that they're still in the game, but there's the passive bonuses that you get for whenever you're near someone. You gain extra experience. I don't know if you get extra magic find. I think, but you gain extra experience for playing together. But it's not something that if you were playing on your own, you wouldn't necessarily feel like, you know, you were being punished for that. Crusader shields are always flat out better for the Crusader. They should be. They're the thing, they're his class weapon. Captain Shelley is named after Joe Shelley, who is the, I believe he's still the current game director on Diablo 4. He is just an absolutely wonderful human being. And here I am meeting him. But no, he's just a lovely, wonderful human being. He came on, he joined the team. He used to work on WoW, and then he joined the team for a while on the expansion. And he did some incredible boss design. Brian on LinkedIn asked, it'd be really interesting to hear where the gameplay features, especially ability system and itemization, was designed to facilitate an ever-evolving metagame. Which parts were inside the original intention, and what was found later? What was something that fell short, and what was something that had more legs than you could have expected? His example is seeing an item that added projectiles to my magic missile was a revelation as a player, a clear inspiration for trying a new build, one framed around an attack I'd always avoided until that point. Yeah, I mean, Brian's example there is literally it. And I sort of talked about this a little bit already. The intention behind the legendaries were that they should be so special that they feel like they're breaking the game for you. He pointed out something which I hadn't mentioned yet as well, is they probably want you to move to a different spell. One of the challenges that we had before we had seasons was that people would be watching a streamer, and that streamer would say, this is the best build for your barbarian. And that's that. Suddenly the entire community was using that build. I'm not disparaging that. They were probably right. But then there's all these other abilities out there that are going unused. And even though they may not be, in quotes, the best, they still might be pretty fun. Again, I mean, part of this comes back to how we tuned the game. We tuned the game, I don't know if you guys remember, but when the game first came out, wasps in Act 2 in Inferno were just a complete nightmare, right? So we tuned the game to be too hard. But that then resulted in players trying to find the best build that they could then focus on. So some of these legendaries were like, okay, go try out this other skill that you might not have thought about using before.
Yes, I live. An artifact lies, and I think the Nephilim, that fool, actually killed me. Of course, this was not my first time stepping through that door, and I imagine it won't be my last. Fortunately, I am well prepared. Some would say that animating a constructed body with preserved memories is not truly coming back to life. I say those fools don't understand the sheer wonder of being Sultan cool.
What do you recommend doing to create attachment ownership through the systems in the game? To be clear, to create an investment in, as well as relationship between the player and the game. Like to make the player care about the game? Do you mean like the character or the game itself? Or both? Is it depends an okay answer?
I enjoyed that.
I think it depends. I think the biggest thing that you can do is try and create systems that encourage the player to spend time with the game and don't make them feel like they made a that make them want to come back tomorrow, but intrinsically as opposed to extrinsically. My wife has played Heyday every single day since it released. She hasn't spent a single dollar on it. But she won't skip it. She plays it because it is comfort food for her. Whereas for Diablo, the systems are designed in such a way that it's the just one more run feeling. It's the promise of it. It's the potential behind trying to find an item. Trying to find that one more upgrade, which I think is the core motivator for people to play a game like this and to start becoming attached to it. Whereas something like, say, EVE Online, way more social. I'm going to use WoW again for like another example, but a lot of the early dungeon and social design was built around, and I'm theory crafting here. I don't know that this is real. This is just my sort of suspicion, and I don't know whether this is intentional or not, or whether this just comes from, say, EverQuest. But a lot of the itemization design in dungeons, specifically dungeons that you have to have a group with, is built around social pressure. So, for example, if I'm playing a dungeon with someone, a group of friends, and someone gets a good item, I feel social pressure to come back and play it with them again. Cozy games are it's just a nice, safe place. So you feel like you're in a place where it's just safe. Whereas a game like Last of Us, I can't play it. I have kids and it just kind of ruins me every time I play it, or try to play it. But that is about experiencing the story and building that personalized relationship with the characters themselves. Bling, I think the biggest thing you can try and figure out is what's your session length, and making sure that players get rewarded for playing a session. We decided that 30 minutes was about our session length. I think it was 30 minutes. It might be an hour. And then we basically said, okay, every hour we want to make sure that you're getting a reward of some sort. Early on, that it's a curve though, right? It's like, so early on, you're getting much more reward on a much faster cadence to ensure that you're getting, invested in it, so that you feel like, oh, okay, I'm getting a reward, I'm getting a reward, I'm getting a reward. And then over time, that curve slows down so that you're getting a reward every hour. And you always feel like no matter what, you always got something from that run. It mitigates the situation where players, and we had this early on when we first launched, players would play for days and not get an upgrade. It's a terrible experience. It's a great question about attachment ownership. I think that's part of the psychological component of understanding what it is about your audience that they enjoy, that makes them attached in that way. Path of Exile is, like, the original Path of Exile is flat out, like, if you want to look at a game that nails that attachment ownership, they are, like, Chris is the king of that. I haven't played Path of Exile 2. I'm honestly kind of scared to sit down and start playing it. I know it's on my list, but wow. I know it's going to be kind of life consuming, and I have 2 kids and a wife that has recently had amputations, so I need to spend time with her as well. So I don't know that I can, like, dig in for that. I know, mate. That's actually why I'm enjoying indies so much. Not that they aren't deep or don't have that, but it doesn't feel like I have to actually put that much personal kind of time investment into everything. Thanks, Dead Set. I want to say the team was very big. I think we're about 120 odd people, and there is no way that I can take credit for, like I say, I worked on the Crusader. I led the team for the Crusader, but that the team, like Julian, like Rachel, like, and so many others, Critter, Roger, like, they're the ones that did so much of the work behind it and making it just so incredible. Although I talk about it a lot, and I think I sort of, have a bit of a face or recognizability around it, for good or bad. But it really comes down to the team that you're with. So I want to make sure that I'm highlighting the fact that they just were just such incredible developers, and feel blessed. I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to work with them. Where is Adria? There she is.
I wish I could do that.
All good, mate. Ask away. Yeah. We talked about it earlier. It's probably like what I regret as well. There was just something far more enjoyable about finding them. I think if we were to revisit it, I probably would have done something where... so the runes, the way it was designed originally, the runes were... they all had to be found. They all had to be discovered. Sorry, I'm fighting a boss and trying to talk at the same time. But basically, all of your skills had empty slots that you could put runes into, and runes were kind of like gems. I think if I... And that was probably like the most frustrating part, is just finding the base power. And that's what I didn't like the most about it, was that... like if I have, say, Blessed Hammer, and then I might go for a long time before I actually get the rune that allows me to use Blessed Hammer Electrify or make the hammers really big, which, because as a fantasy, like, I'm the Crusader, why haven't I learned that already? Why do I need to go out into the world and try and find it? So what I would probably change is we would, I'd suggest we would have started with that base power. So electrified, Blessed Hammer, just by default, have that unlock as you level up, but then have the runes drop that can then be equipped, and then they add modifiers to it, or like maybe the affixes, like what I was talking about before. I think it takes a little bit away from some of the potency, because it's of the design idea, because it's kind of saturating it. Like, it's not as pure. And by pure, I mean the pure one is like, no, you don't have it, you have to go find it. That's the completely pure implementation of it. So it takes some away from that moment of, wow, I found electrified Blessed Hammer, I've been looking for this for so long. But it does retain the feeling of continuing to extend the legs of the skill system. As it is right now, once you've maxed out your character, that's that. There's no more unlocks. All of the unlocks now come from legendaries or set items, which are interesting in and of themselves, but they don't have the same relationship with the character as your skills do. If you're looking for a good resource system for a character, I firmly believe that Wrath is probably one of the best types. I won't die on a hill for it, but I do believe that Wrath, as is probably one of the better resource models for an ARPG, where you have spenders and generators, and then your ability, your core resource has passive regeneration. Look, in an ARPG, entering combat without an ability sucks. Like running up and like charging and like hitting a bad guy and having to do a couple of generators before you can have your big spender just feels terrible. We found that with the Barb, you know, like the Barbarian has his where he has to like use a couple of generators before he can start getting to the point where he can actually use a big spender. And oftentimes, especially in multiplayer, the creatures are dead before you get to use your big spender. So all you're doing is like coming in doing a couple of punches, and then running to the next pack. With Wrath, it regenerates passively between fights, so then I can enter the next fight with the ability, like with my big spender, which just feels amazing. Just feels great. But then I have my generators, like the primaries, that I have to then cast in order to regen and use that bigger power again on longer fights.
I wish I could do that.
Wow, she's got a lot of health. Or maybe I just haven't been upgrading my stuff much.
I must wait longer. I need healing. I must wait longer.
If I die, I'm going to be miffed.
I must wait longer.
Oof.
Diablo will return. I have done what I can to ensure it. He always finds a way. In your heart of hearts.
What do you recommend implementing to quash the fears or concerns of new players into existing live service games? By what fear do you mean?
I'm returning to town.
Somewhat related, there was a good GDC talk by a Riot designer on cursed or unsolvable problems. One of them is something D3, theory-wide, community-wide theory crafting. Have you come across, thought about solving for this? I ask because heavy randomization of drop skill runes would greatly hinder lopsided meta games in season-based ARPGs like D3. I think I remember the talk. We always said players are why we can't have nice things, which sounds kind of terrible when I say it out loud, but it is kind of the reality of live service games today, where the community will see something and then trend towards it that's based entirely on theory crafting. I think the best thing that we can do is kind of accept that it's not going to be something which can be pre-solved. It's going to be something which can be responded to. And so long as your systems are built in such a way that they can be heavily tuned and easily tuned, or that you can add content to in order to mitigate for it, I actually think that it's something you can kind of just integrate into the design for it. Seasons is the best example of this. It's okay to create something that lets the player break the game. It's okay, right? Like, especially in like an ARPG game like this, or in live service games. Hell, look, if in Marvel Rivals for the next week, Iron Man's ability was the best thing ever, and the entire community like trended over to using Iron Man, okay, they're going to feel great. Like, it's going to be okay for them to do that. Like, what's the problem with the player having fun? When we were, there was a time when, I can't remember what it is we were working on, but I think I was working on the legendaries. Right, the legendaries, and we were talking about balance and how if we had the philosophy that the legendary items should be the thing that basically just breaks the entire game, what's the point of that? Like, what is isn't that bad? No. Why would that be bad? The fallen grunt isn't going to care when he dies. He's not going to care that some Crusader came along and like beat the living smack out of him, because it's an NPC, it's a character in the game. His job is to die and maybe drop loot for you. So it should be fun for the player. There should be an amount of that. And if your players are theory crafting and enjoying theory crafting and enjoying moving between different builds, that's okay. The problem really is around the game becoming stale. Now, if the game becomes stale because there is one meta and that meta can't, like, your game can't adapt or can't be tuned in such a way that you can shift players away from that meta, then yes, that is the fundamental problem at that point. But I don't think it's a cursed problem if you intentionally integrate the solution or understand that it's a live service game. You're going to have to be able to respond to players' theory crafting and what they believe the meta to be, and design systems that ensure that, you know, players can do that. That the designers can respond to that. Can I just ask, is the stream still okay? Okay, awesome. My kids just started playing and they're playing online as well. And so it's taking up some of the stuff. I have an 11 and a 13-year-old boy. And we're playing Helldivers 2 together lately. And it's just, yeah, I don't know, man. I never really thought that I would, I don't know if I should say this on stream, but first and foremost, I love my kids and I love my family and they're the most important thing to me. But before I had kids, I never really thought I wanted kids. I was always very kind of, I guess, intimidated by the idea, probably afraid, but they're the best thing ever. They have played couch co-op Diablo with their friends. And that's when their friends found out that I make games for a living. They don't play it anywhere near as much as most people do. They tend to bounce around between different games, as opposed to like play one very specific game. They have played, my youngest has played a bunch of other games that I've made as well. Thanks, Richard. My kids have so much access to so many games that because of the family, the Steam family thing. So they just play a whole bunch of variety of them. And I typically don't let them play PvP games, like PvP shooter games. It just gets them too... it's not appropriate for them right now. What are your thoughts on... This is a great question. Mateus. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but what are your thoughts about inflation in player expectation about frequency and quality of upgrades caused by roguelites, where you get meaningful upgrades every 20 seconds. Reach an endgame character in 30 minutes, which usually takes 20 hours. It's an interesting one. I'm going to fall back on it depends on your audience. If someone came into Path of Exile 2 with that expectation, I have a feeling if you asked Chris, like, what's his thoughts on that, he'd say, well, they shouldn't be playing the game. The game's just not for them. And that's okay. There's enough players out there. There's what, 9 billion people in the world right now. 2 billion of them identify as gamers. And so that just means that they're not your audience. And that you, that's okay. You can't make a game for everyone. There's no such thing. I mean, maybe Balatro is the closest thing to a game for everyone. I also think that never a guest on code monkey, though I'd love to hang out with him one day. I had a thought. Oh, I also think that I sort of mentioned this earlier with regards to rewarding players, but the initial reward curve for a longer term RPG, you probably want it to be more rapid early on, and then just slowly train the player that they're not going to get, that they're still going to get rewards, but it's going to take longer. Like that reward cadence gets longer as time goes on. So for example, early on, they might be getting an upgrade every minute. But then as they continue to play, you smooth that out and the reward curve extends out more to like once every 30 minutes or once every hour or something along those kind of lines. Would they play a PvP game without firearms? Huh. I'm trying to think if they ever have. Your boys, they're so into guns. It's insane. It's probably my fault too. I have a 3D printer and I help my son print a 3D printer gun. not a real one. Print like a Halo gun. So it's kind of my fault. But trying to think if they do play any PvP games that... Nah, they don't actually play PvP games that have guns in them. Closest thing is one of them has tried playing Dawn of War, but he only really wanted to play... he only ever wanted to play on the campaign. Yeah, it's an age thing too. My youngest is almost entirely plays Roblox. But that's a social thing for him. He hangs out on Discord and plays just random games, mostly like Doors and such. Do I think I could level faster on normal than on hard? I don't think so. I believe that there is still the benefit for, yeah, I mean, there still is the benefit of having more experience for being in hard. And it's not like the creatures are dying any slowly. Like the only ones that are dying slower are, like Adria took forever to kill. I really want to finish one bounty before the end of the stream. Now I've got some things to kill. I hate these doors. I hate these doors so much. Personal thing. I'm so glad we brought back Blessed Hammer. I know that we did the whole thing where, I mean, Crusader instead of Paladin type thing, but oh yeah. I'm just checking to see if there's any other questions on the chat as well, on the thread. Oh, okay. Current PoE2 endgame has become standard ARPG 1 to 2 button clear the screen, one-shot bosses gameplay, different from the marketing of the game being slower and methodical. Is the genie out of the bottle? Seraph, do you mean can they ever make the game slower again? Mateus, where do you think ARPGs are going to evolve in next generation? Current RPGs are massive, focused on endgame, complex itemization, cosmetics. Where do you think it will go from here? So I think D5 and PoE3 will follow the same trend that they are currently going on. I think that they are AAA. I think that they have these massive, big established audiences now. And the best thing that they can do in order to maintain that is just to give those players more of what they want, which is that massive thing. From an indie perspective, I think that Bullet Heaven games are probably where the most interest is, where I'm seeing the most kind of. I think that there's a real opportunity in indies for that, for Bullet Heaven type games. To take over the ARPG throne in some way. Death Must Die, Halls of Torment are really, really interesting games, which allow you to... It captures a lot of the ARPG feeling of building a kit without the overall higher end cost of... making a game fully, making all the narrative and making all that extra content. And there's so much that needs to go into these massive games that a game like Death Must Die or Halls of Torment can do in a much smaller form. The one thing that those games are kind of lacking right now is the combat. The combat feels very, it's just too simplistic. Yeah, like the Vampire Survivors type thing. There was a new one that I saw recently that was really interesting. I don't remember who was streaming it. I have it on my wish list, but I can't look it up right now. But just that feeling of, I think there's something there with the Vampire Survivors type games, but they need to lean a lot more into itemization, and they need to lean a lot more into the combat component. And I think that they're going to have a lot of, I think that's where we're going to see a lot more like pushing forward of the genre, as opposed to PoE 3 or D5. I didn't even know that chorus. I'm going to link my coffee page here. I do all this just for free. That is not correct. If you guys feel like supporting me in that way, buy me a coffee, something like that, I'd appreciate it. All the games that I buy, everything like that just comes out of my own pocket, and I love doing this. And I feel weird asking for money, but if you guys do want to support it, again, I'd appreciate it. It's not new, dead set. I mean, when we launched Diablo, there were streamers running Act 3 again and again and again and again and again. We did not have the ability to patch out that problem, which, you know, resulted like we didn't have the ability to react effectively in a way that mitigated the problem that what we were seeing. Alakazam had basically found one location in Act 3 that he believed was the most efficient, and that's what he ran, just that, again and again and again and again and again. Our solution to that actually ended up being adventure mode. we were like, hey, if the way that people want to play these games is they want to find areas that are efficient and farm them, why not just lean into that and create a system that pushes players around the map into these different areas, and then just make sure that the reward that they receive is dramatically better than what they could ever possibly be guaranteed to receive by simply doing the one small run in Act 3 that the community had deemed to be rewarding. The solution isn't always just nerf it. I made that mistake. With one of the worst things I ever did on Diablo was I nerfed when we first launched. We had the auction house live, and there were certain affixes that were extraordinarily powerful, specifically crit hit and crit damage. Crit hit chance and crit hit damage. Those two affixes combined were basically, that was it. And then we ended up, it was basically the only thing that you could do. And the math was a little bit off. So yes, it was probably too powerful fundamentally anyway. I made the mistake of nerfing it by changing the core stat of one of them. I think it was crit hit chance, so that it wouldn't scale as much. Was not the right solution. For many reasons. One of them, of course, being that people had paid real money for these items, and then all of a sudden, that item changed underneath them. It'd basically be like, imagine you bought, this can happen, imagine you bought a Tesla, and then overnight, they decided to limit the max speed that it could go. I mean, Tesla can actually do that. I hope they don't, because unfortunately I have a Tesla, but yeah, that's totally something that would be possible. And that's a mistake that I made. And it was just, the mistake was that I just changed the core stat, as opposed to like, we didn't spend enough time thinking about it, talking about what the real solution might be. I don't know if there actually would have been a different solution, but I think the real solution would have just been to leave it be the way it was, and maybe modify some of the other stats, some of the skills that were benefiting so much from it, as opposed to simply nerfing the item itself, which felt like a very reactive change to the problem. That's another piece of advice. When you have a live game, you're dealing... people need to be able to trust you as the developer. If they can't trust you, or if you do something to break their trust, you kind of get one chance at that. I love the horse. One of my favorite things. I never thought it would be that much fun. We knew we wanted to have him have a movement ability, but we also knew that we wanted him to feel kind of slower and heavier and more stoic than the other classes. So, you know, pulling out this awesome steed fits so well with his fantasy. And then some of the runes, like draw and quarter, like, it's just so much fun. Never expected it to happen. It's one of those ones that once you start implementing them and you do them in a rough format, it's like, wow, that is the thing. Only downside is that it can split players up a lot. But that's kind of on players to figure it out. Game also looks really good still. For a game that is as old as it is, it's certainly aged well. I mean, there hasn't been any big graphical updates or anything like that that we did for World of Warcraft. It's just the way it is. I'm really impressed with what the art team did. Oh yeah. I think that Diablo 3 actually could have been a game which was nothing but greater riffs. I remember Dustin Browder. Oh, can we just pause and remember how terrible Mortar was when the game first came out? Dustin Browder, who was the, I don't know if you guys know who Dustin is, but he was the game director for StarCraft and Hearthstone, not Hearthstone, Heroes of the Storm. He would constantly just come over and say, just give me a dungeon that I can play endlessly. And every level is just random. I think that's actually like a pretty cool opportunity for indies. Like one of the big overwhelming elements of an ARPG is all the story and the narrative and all that sort of jazz. And, you know, like, I think it's good. I don't think that most of your audience cares that much about it. I think most of your audience cares about getting fun loot and building kits. And so having just a dungeon that just goes down and down and down. I don't know how many of you guys saw my latest video, but Barony does that. Really light on story, and you're basically just going deeper and deeper and deeper into a dungeon. Yes, and the Mythic Plus element, like the what am I trying to say? You're totally right. It's the scaling of the difficulty as the game progresses, which players buy into and want to engage in, and then they have to solve for using the tools that they've been given. I think it's very well designed, the Greater Rift system. I mean, the same thing with Mythic Plus Dungeons, right? Like, Mythic Plus Dungeons is probably one of the best things in WoW. From a systemic perspective like that. ranking and seasonal, right? Like where it resets.
This place.
An ancient we would be. A terrible evil is held in check by those seals. Once undone, we cannot.
Hardest things about those big systems is prototyping them. Because they're such big, large scale things.
I wish I could do that.
I don't want to die.
The crusade marches on.
A lot of these little, the 55, 56 kill things were actually things that the console team implemented. There was actually a separate team making the console version. They were still sitting with the Diablo team, but they were pretty much entirely separate while we were building the expansion. But they did an amazing job. Yeah. Super passive, right? Like, it's one of those like little subtle benefits that you get.
Not yet.
Fellow Nephilim. Foolish, but impressive.
200. Right on the number. All right, back to town.
Well done. You have finished all the bounties.
And loot. So I made the blacksmith and stuff. Born is my character's name. Little things you get to do. Born has always been my character name since forever, but actually mostly since World of Warcraft, when I had a warrior, and Liu is my wife's middle name. Small little things that you get to do. Umbral Oath is nothing. It's not related to me at all. Okay, folks. I am going to wrap it up here. I have some things to do with the family. So I appreciate everyone coming and hanging out. I really appreciate all your questions. I'm going to probably continue to live stream a little bit every once in a while, specifically as I play games for research that I'm going to be doing. But yeah, thanks everyone for coming out and hanging out with me. It's been fun. It's been a little bit of a blast from the past, that's for sure. Take care, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful day.